is former WWE wrestler and ECW original, the Blue Meanie of the Blue World Order fame. I'm very excited to be here with Hannibal on Hannibal TV to do this interview. I'm a big fan of the channel. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoy watching.
So where did you grow up?
I was born in South Philadelphia, right in the heart of South Philly, right near the Vet, near the Spectrum, near everything you could possibly want to go to as a Philly sports fan. We lived in South Philly till I was about 2 years old, and then when I was 2, my family decided to move over to New Jersey for a little bit, and then when I was 10, we moved to Atlantic City because my mom, being a single mom and raising me and my sister, it was hard raising 2 kids by herself. So my grandparents helped a lot, but their dream was to retire to Atlantic City. So when my grandparents retired to Atlantic City, they said to my mom, we'll help you raise Brian, and they got guardianship of me and brought me to Atlantic City when I was 10 years old. And the cool thing is, I'd already, every summer, it was a tradition to get a cottage down at the shore and get a summer house, and I was on the beach every summer. So the move to Atlantic City just made perfect sense, and my formative years was there from when I was 10 years old until I decided to go to Al Snow's in Ohio and train for a year, and then I moved back.
Is there any wrestling match you saw as a kid that stands out? There were so many in Philadelphia.
The first match I recall seeing, I know it wasn't the exact first match, but it was like the main event of that TV show, was when Rick Martel and Tony Garea beat Mr. Fuji and Saito for the WWF tag team titles. And I'm sure I watched the first half of the show too, but that match stood out the most because in my first show I ever watched, I watched a title change, and the funny thing that came to be is I didn't know about wrestling up until that day. I was living in a small town called Gloucester City, New Jersey. I had a friend, Sean. I was like, "Hey, Sean, you want to come over and watch the Phillies game? We want to watch some baseball." He's like, "I can't. I'm watching wrestling." I was like, "What's wrestling?" I'm like 7, 8 years old. I had never seen it before, so I went over to his house and watched it and fell in love. And I was like, "That's the greatest thing." And that's all I ever wanted to do since I was a kid.
What was the atmosphere like at the Spectrum in the 80s, seeing wrestling?
The atmosphere in the Philadelphia Spectrum as a kid was pretty much just like every sporting event in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a very blue-collar town, meat and potatoes, bloody knuckles, hard workers, and stuff like that. So when it comes to their sports, if you stink, they'll let you know. But if you work hard and they recognize it, they'll love you and you'll be over forever. And the same thing with the wrestling. Everybody in South Philly loved Bruno. Everybody, and then my first heavyweight champion was Bob Backlund. Everybody loved Bob Backlund, and they got heated over. It was they got as heated for the wrestling matches as they do as if the Philadelphia Eagles were playing the Dallas Cowboys. They really got into the rivalries, and later on when wrestling became more sophisticated, like if they liked you, they knew your history. Especially with the help of the magazines like Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Wrestler, Inside Wrestling, or on quote unquote the after magazines. We did our research on our wrestlers and our sports teams, and we had a rabid fan base that it was an obsession because there was a period of time in Philadelphia like the 70s where it was really lean years, a lot of unemployment and stuff like that, and people needed a distraction in Philadelphia. And they had the Broad Street Bullies in hockey with the Flyers. the eagle stunk through that time. But hey, we had pro wrestling every weekend on Channel 48, on Channel 17, and if you lived in some areas in Philadelphia, if you were lucky enough, there was a divide in the city on Broad Street. This side of Broad Street had cable. That side of Broad Street didn't have cable. So if you wanted to watch, Spectrum Wrestling, which was every Saturday night they would have the wrestling at the Spectrum, but on Sunday morning they would replay the entire card with play-by-play on a local channel called Prism. And if you wanted to watch Spectrum Wrestling, you had to cross Broad Street to find a friend who had cable at the time. And it was just, it was cool to, you can, go to a show one night and then see yourself on TV the next day. So
you mentioned you were a Bob Backlund fan. Is there anyone else that stands out to you that you're a big fan of?
Oh man, I just loved all those. I eventually grew to love every promotion, but WWE was my first, WWF was my first wrestling promotion, so I loved Bob Backlund. Huge fan of Rick Martel while he was there. Ivan Putski, the Polish Power, he would sing and, sing a polka song afterwards. And then I loved Tony Garea. He would have the best comeback. He'd fire up and come back. SD Special Delivery Jones. With the double finger point and stuff like that. And Philadelphia is an underdog town, so I always liked the enhancement guys, the jobbers, for lack of a better term, the carpenters, if you will. The guys who look like they're always about to win, and then somehow the devious heels did something, they cost them the victory, and the grasps of victory, and then the foils of defeat, or whatever I'm trying to say. But I always liked the underdogs. But Bob Backlund, he was a machine. And how could I forget, Jimmy Superfly Snuka, who was such an innovator. The first time I ever saw Jimmy Snuka wrestle in the cage, and then watch him try to come off the top of the cage onto Bob Backlund, and then miss because Backlund got out of the way, and then eventually he went back to the well and actually hit Don Morocco with the splash. And you see what guys do nowadays. It's almost like watching The Matrix, but a simple move of Jimmy Snuka doing a splash off the top rope and then the splash off the cage was unthought of. And if you were lucky to have a VCR back in those times, when VCRs were $1,000 or something like that, you'd be hit and rewind, play again, hit rewind, play again, and just be in amazement. Definitely Jimmy Snuka, and guys like Tito Santana, who also, the fans of Philadelphia recognize as a hard worker, a blue collar, fists up kind of baby face that Philly could easily get behind.
What point did you decide you were going to be a wrestler?
And the funny thing is, I always thought I wanted to be a wrestler. I watched every week, and then there was the advent of wrestling schools like the Monster Factory that came along, maybe 85, 86-ish. It was there 83, 84, but it wasn't prominent on television until about maybe 85, 86, when Bam Bam Bigelow came on the scene, and he was like the first breakout star from the school, and they started getting on all the national TV circuits, and back in the day we would before Entertainment Tonight there was shows like Evening Magazine, PM Magazine, like local profile shows, and there's Larry Sharp in the Monster Factory, there's Larry Sharp in the Monster Factory on Good Morning America, stuff like that. So seeing that gave me a glimpse of there's a chance that I could become a professional wrestler, because how, other than that, how would you go about it? Being a kid, not knowing anything, they didn't have pro wrestling day career day in grade school and stuff like that. Oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a wrestler. There was none of that. So when I started seeing stuff for like the Monster Factory, stuff like that, I was like, oh my God, this is real. So, eventually it was always in my mind that, go to school, graduate high school. I ain't going to college because I want to be a wrestler. Not, that's my mindset, And, I started researching it, I graduated from the After magazines, and then my freshman year of high school, I made a friend named Justin Rosanio, who is probably like the first smart mark wrestling fan that I had met. I'd always kind of had a hint that it was a work, and I had seen this docile thing, and the exposés. But in my heart of hearts, I always defended it, wrestling, to my family, who was like, why do you watch that fake stuff? Those turnbuckles are padded. I was like, yeah, but there's steel underneath there. That really hurts. As a kid, I'm trying to, kayfabe and stuff like that. But I had seen all the exposés and stuff like that. But then I started reading, the Observers and the Pro Wrestling Torches, thanks to my friend. And through that, I started seeing advertisements for different wrestling schools. And, I started following, I started looking at the Monster Factory. But then I found out Dean Malenko and the Malenkos had a school in Tampa. So I started doing exchanges with the Malenko school, where I met a friend named Phyllis Lee. And Phyllis was she worked for Professor Malenko, Larry, and she started corresponding with me. And at one point, I was pretty much going to go to Malenko school, and then I found out, the cost of living down there was a little bit more than I had saved up for. And she had told me, there's a guy in Ohio named Al Snow. The tuition's about the same, but the cost of living is far less, and you can actually live in the school. And I was like, on blind faith. I had never seen Al. I had heard of Al. I had never seen Al wrestle. And on blind faith, I sent this woman, who I'd only known from letters, the tuition to the school, and started making plans on moving to Ohio to train with Al.
Wow, so there was an actual area in that school where you could sleep. Yeah,
the cool thing about Al Snow's school, Body Slammers, in Lima, Ohio, it was in an old Masonic temple. The building was like 6 or 7 stories, and we had floor 5 and 6. So when you went into the building, you took an elevator up to the 5th floor, and then you go out there, you turn to the right, there's like a living area, there's a commons area with couch, TV, love seats. You go a little further, there's a kitchen. If you make a left out of the elevator, there's Al's office, and then if you go around, there's like bedrooms, and then there was also an area that Al had set up for weights. And then if you go upstairs, there's a balcony area with more rooms and stuff like that. But the area with the ring was really cool. It looked like a miniature Manhattan Center, like where they did Monday Night Raw, where the future, eventually they would do Monday Night Raw, where there's the ring, there's the balconies on all sides, and there was a stage where the Masons would do their services back in the day. And then, there was, there was 2 entranceways, which I'm sure were for whatever mass services, but Al turned them into, entranceways for wrestling, and behind that was the gym area where you could work out with weights and stuff like that. So Al had a really sweet setup, which I had no idea going into this, because like I said, I had sent that letter and that money to Phyllis in blind faith. I drove 13 hours from Atlantic City to Lima, Ohio to meet a guy I'd never seen wrestle, just for the fact that this lady who had represented Malenko said, Al's the good dude. And this is right around the time Al was starting to really make a name for himself with his feud with Sabu. They just had their first match, which was this breakout match that made its way around with all the tape traders at the time. And once I got the funny thing is, I drive 13 hours to meet this guy I'd never met, don't know what he looks like. And I go, "Hi, is Al Snow here?" He goes, "Hi, I'm Al, and I'm leaving right now because I'm driving up to Michigan to get padding for the ring from Dan to be Severn." So it was like, "Hi, bye," and I sat around for several hours with some of his students. Most of them were cool, and then some were interesting. And I almost packed up my car and turned around and drove right back to Lima, just because. It was my first time away from leaving home. People leave home to go to college where they learn to be a doctor or whatever, or an accountant. I left home to become a professional wrestler in an industry that had no guarantees whatsoever. There's zero opportunity and guarantees in the wrestling business to make it, whereas if you become a doctor or a mechanic, nobody's on the side of the road with their car broken down going, "Man, I wish there was a pro wrestler here to help fix my car." Somebody always needs a mechanic, somebody always needs their taxes done or whatever. But I was very fortunate to be steered towards Al's school and on blind faith.
Is there anyone that was training there at the same time as you that went on to make a name for themselves?
When I started training with Al had just started training Dan Severn for pro wrestling, and because Dan had been doing, his credentials speak for themselves, there was a few guys that actually should have been bigger than they became. There's a wrestler named Geza Coleman, who was wrestling as the Kodiak at the time, and then he wrestled as Crom. Big, burly Canadian dude. He would drive. There was a crew of guys who would drive down from Ontario area, like Windsor area, stuff like that. They would drive down on the weekends and train. There's guys who would drive down from Michigan. There was a kid named Jimmy V, Jim Varner, who had some success. He would go and do the Super 8s for Jim Kentner down in Delaware, but then he started making, as he was wrestling, he started getting to the fitness thing, and he became one of the top fitness experts, and he actually had a couple students on a couple clients on The Biggest Loser, the weight loss competition, where he would train them, and they would go on to try to lose weight and win that competition and stuff like that. But myself, you have to break it down, because there's Al Snow's Body Slammers Gym, and then you would have to break it off into the Tough Enough category, because he had.
Oh, there's so many people he's trained.
Yeah, so many trainings. But as far as the Body Slammers era, Al Snow, because eventually he closed down Body Slammers when he started doing Smoky Mountain, and that started picking up. And when he went to WWE, he said, "I can't put my name on something if I'm not there full time and have my name on it." Oh, also at Body Slammers, guys like Reckless Youth went there to polish up their skills. D'Lo Brown went there to work on and train and polish up his skills. So it would be myself, Dan Severn, D'Lo Brown, and Reckless Youth.
Didn't Steve Austin even go there once to polish up his skills?
Unfortunately, I missed Steve by maybe a couple months. Steve had been working for ECW, and he had just hurt his tricep or something like that, and he was going back to the WWE. He was going to the WWE, and he wanted to get some of the ring rust off, and he went there to train with Al. And I'd left maybe 3 months prior. So yeah, but Steve went there for a good week to train with Al and knock off some of the ring rust.
So what was the first name you used when you got on the Indies?
Well, the first name, it lasted one match. My my first match was in Chatham, Ontario, Canada. And at the time, in my younger days, before I was a wrestler, I had met a girl who I thought liked me, and I thought I liked her. She's like, you look like Emilio Estevez. And me being stupid, knowing I didn't look like Emilio Estevez, I was like, maybe I could call myself Brian Estevez one day or whatever. I was like, whatever. So my first match, I wrestled as Brian Estevez, which lasted one match because I called home to my grandparents. I was like, I had my first match. And they're like, oh, what'd you call yourself? I was like, Brian Estevez. They're like, but you're not Mexican. Because Emilio Estevez, they have Spanish or whatever. It was a Spanish-sounding name. So I was like, I'm going to have to rethink that because, I'm pale Irish. I walk into the sun and I explode just because I'm so pale. But after that, I started messing around with names. I'd heard of the name. I'd been flipping around the After magazines, and I saw the name Brian St. John back in the day. I was like, oh, that kind of fits. But it wasn't really like cool. And then eventually I settled on Brian Rollins because I'd been sitting around Al's gym. I was sitting in the living area, and me and one of his other students, John Pee Wee Moore, who also went on to make a name for himself. Just off the top of my head, I remembered him. He had done a lot of work with Sabu and stuff. We were sitting around and we were just like looking at cassette tapes, and he goes, Henry Rollins. He had a Henry Rollins tape. I was like, Brian Rollins would be a great name. So I started calling myself Brian Rollins. And I gave myself the moniker the Zebra Kid because I had the genius idea of the one trip Al took us to. Back in the day, if you wanted tights made, you want a gear made, there was one company called K&H, which was basically the initials for Carl and Hildegard. Was a company who pretty much made gear for everybody, and they were in Ohio, right outside of Columbus. It was an hour and a half drive from Lima, and some people, I guess, they go on class trips to go see fine art in a museum. We went on a class trip to go buy gear. Right? With Al Snow, we packed into his minivan and drove down and picked out gear. And a lot of the times, guys would order stuff and not pay for it. And there was this, bin of unpaid for gear. So I'm flipping through and I saw these pair of zebra tights. And it was a big mark for the Road Warriors. I would always wear the Zubaz because I wanted to, wear what the wrestlers wore.
Right.
And I bought
their company for anyone that didn't know.
Yeah. It was the Road Warriors, and I believe Dan Marino had a hand in it as well. Started Zubaz, which all the wrestling fans started wearing because they, on TBS, the Road Warriors are wearing their Zubaz, and everybody wanted to be cool, and we all grew our mullets and wanted to be Bobby Eaton. I had the best mullet in high school. Bobby Eaton was my idol as far as mullets go. And then later on, Shawn Michaels had his pretty sweet mullet too. But I got the zebra tights, inspired by Zubaz, and I had a singlet over. I was like, I'll call myself the Zebra Kid. What does it mean? I have no stinking clue. So I was the Zebra Kid, Brian Reynolds, for pretty much the rest of my career until I was fortunate enough to be paired up with or meet up with Steve Richards and Raven on a series of indie shows. And they were like, yeah. And Raven was like, yeah, I got an idea for you. It's not going to be Brian Rollins, though.
Because Raven had a hand in the booking of ECW at that time.
Yeah.
I guess.
The cool thing about ECW was it really was a democracy. Paul was in charge, but if you had a great idea, he wasn't above letting you pitch an idea, and if he liked it, he used it. If he didn't like it, he might have tweaked it and helped make it a little bit better. And everybody in the locker room pretty much had a say, from Dreamer, Tess, Sabu, Shane, and I was so fortunate to have that learning tree to sit under. But Raven came up with the idea for the Blue Meanie because I I had met Raven and Stevie on a series of independent shows. One was in Baltimore, one was in a horse barn in Virginia, and then finally we did a show in Pittsburgh for a promoter named Norm Connors, who I'm forever grateful for, because he started booking me when I was starting my career, and even when I moved back to Atlantic City, I would still drive back out to Pittsburgh to work for Norm. And I wasn't even booked on this one show, but I had a feeling that Norm had these shows coming up, and for some reason I just had to be there. I called him up. I was like, Norm, I know you got shows this weekend. They're probably full. I don't care. I'm just going to come out and hang out. I'm just going to come out, and because Norm's a good dude. He's a cool dude. We're around the same age, like-minded people, and like-minded people like to flock towards like-minded people. So I just took I didn't even have a car at the time. I took a 6-hour Greyhound bus out to Pittsburgh to hang out with Norm Connors for the weekend. And he threw me a bone, and he put me on his Friday night show. He had a Friday, Saturday. He put me on his Friday show, and lo and behold, he had Raven and Stevie Richards on the show, who had already been on a series of shows before. And I went on and had a match with a guy who was doing a Batman gimmick, which was funny because at the time I had this little goatee and a buzz cut, and everybody said I looked like one of the Batman villains, King Tut. So
yes.
So it was basically King Tut versus Batman, and the match wasn't that great. I was green as grass, but I did my moonsault in the match. I always did when I was about to lose, I would set the guy for the moonsault to get out of the way, hit me with their gimmick, 1, 2, 3, which is pretty much most of my career. But I did that. Went back, and as anybody in this best wrestling business should do, when you're done your match, go back and watch everybody else's matches on the show. So I went and watched Raven's match. He was wrestling a local wrestler named Ray the Crippler Roberts, and Ray was an interesting guy too. There's a whole nother story you could do on him. But I watched Ray Roberts did some time in prison, and then once he got out of prison, he went to Alice to Train, and he just became over. He just come out, and I'm getting off course, but I wanted to watch Ray wrestle Raven because I loved Ray because he was such a character behind the scenes. I loved him. But I also loved Raven because I thought his psychology was second to none. He was so smart. You could do nothing but learn from him. So I watched the match, and Raven comes back through I was like, I enjoy your match. And the first thing he said to me, hey, nice moonsault. I went, Raven watched my match. It's like, holy shit, Raven watched my match. I got a little jolt of adrenaline. I was like, cool, So I went, got changed. I stayed at Norm's house for that weekend, and I was going to stay at Norm's house, and it turned out that also, not only was I staying at Norm's house, Raven and Stevie were staying at Norm's house, so it was like a house party. We were just sitting around drinking beers, talking wrestling. Next morning we woke up mid-afternoon, and we were around the corner for Chinese food, and we're sitting around eating, and then that's when Raven pitched the idea for me to be Stevie's lackey. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, we had this idea. We want to, Stevie's my lackey, but we wanted to have a lackey for a lackey. Stevie wears the half shirts and the Daisy Dukes, but we wanted to have this really fat guy idolize Stevie and wear a half shirt and Daisy Dukes. And we have this guy in mind, but he can't wrestle, he can't bump. You wrestle and you can bump and you do that moonsault. What'd you want to do? I was like, I'm going to be in ECW, right? He's like, yeah. He's like, but you're going to have to wear a half shirt and Daisy Dukes. I went, I don't care. I don't care. It's a foot in the door. It's an opportunity. And we talked about it, and then he had me I started showing up to shows. He introduced me to Paul Heyman and a lot of the guys to get familiarized, so people start getting familiar with me being around. And some of the guys I'd already been familiar with, like Taz and Tommy Dreamer, because thankfully when I started training with Al, Sabu used to book a lot of Al students on his shows. He would do NWA Michigan.
Okay.
So I would be on shows already with Taz and Sabu, and he brought out Paul Heyman for a show. And then there was an angle where I did a loser gets his head shaved match with this kid named Sean Brown, and the gimmick of the match was loser gets his head shaved. So we purposely went to a draw. The psychology makes no sense because we were like, we're not getting our head shaved. Well, in reality, we should have both got our head shaved. But the crowd thought they were getting screwed. So Paul Lee and Sabu slid in, beat us up, and shaved our heads. So when Raven started bringing me around the shows, Paulie was like, hey, you're the kid. We shaved your head and all this stuff. So it made him a little bit more accepting to bringing me in, and he pitched me to Paulie and Todd, and I initially debuted the month before November 95. But unfortunately, that whole show got scrapped because that was the incident where a fan accidentally got set on fire. A fan guy accidentally got set on fire. So I'm sitting in the crowd as Brian Rollins in my Van Halen half shirt, Daisy Dukes, stuff like that. And I do my debut, and Stevie wrestled Johnny Grunge. And we did a thing where, me and Stevie interact with each other. I'm still in the crowd, and then Johnny Grunge comes over, hits me, and I scamper off and run out. And so I go back to the locker room and watch the rest of the show. So Terry Funk is wrestling Cactus Jack. And they had made this plan for Cactus Jack. Well, before, Terry Funk had been hitting Cactus Jack with a flaming branding iron. So to get revenge on Terry, this time around, he was going to hit him with a flaming chair shot. So they wrapped a towel around the chair, doused it with whatever lighting fluid, and taped it to the chair. So, as not thinking, when you light a towel on fire and you only use tape to keep it to the chair, the tape's going to melt. So Cactus goes to hit Terry, and the flaming towel lands on Terry, and Terry turns into this huge wick. And he rolls out. He's trying to do the stop, drop, and roll. And a fan reached over the guardrail and tried to pat Terry out. I guess he thought he was doing a good deed, but in reality, he wound up, burning his arms. And I saying just, we set a fan on fire, but the fan reached over and involved himself in it and burned his hands up and stuff like that. So, and then the crazier thing is that I'd already planned this thing where the lights were going to go out. Before the whole incident, the lights were going to come back on. The spotlight was going to be on Raven and Tommy Dreamer up in the balcony, and he was going to have Tommy Dreamer linked up with chains, like almost like crucifying him, like having Tommy Dreamer on display. So he goes to him with the flaming chair. Towel goes off. Terry Funk's up in flames. Fan starts to pat him out. They come around, hit Terry with, I believe, a fire extinguisher. Lights go out. The crowd's freaking out because, fire, lights go out. It almost became like a Who concert where like fans are like barging for the doors and trampling other people to get out and stuff like that. And the lights come on and they still do the gimmick. I think that that thing, the view of Tommy being chained up was the only thing that made air.
Were you around for the mass transit incident?
Yeah, the mass transit incident was really unfortunate for everybody involved, really. And the weird thing is, like, I saw the kid in the locker room, and I thought he worked for the building. We were at a racetrack, and I think it was in Revere, Massachusetts. And I'm sitting there, I'm like watching this guy walking around the locker room. I was like, oh, maybe he's security guard for the racetrack. And it was so weird because other people said he when he showed up with like 2 midget wrestlers, and he tried to get on the show, and he pitched himself to Paulie, saying that he was doing this Ralph Cramden gimmick. He wanted to wrestle as Ralph Cramden, and Paulie was like, nah, you'll be Mass Transit. And this whole thing happened because originally Devon and Axel Rotten were a tag team, and for whatever reason Axel couldn't make the show. So as a last minute replacement, usually, you show up and you introduce yourself, and if they decide to use you, they use you. And this kid had said he was trained by Killer Kowalski. And he said he was, older than what he was. I forget what he said, but at the time he was 16, 17. I believe he said he was 19. And the ironic thing about the whole mass transit thing is he claimed he was trained by Killer Kowalski, and normally Killer Kowalski would come to these events with his students, and before every ECW show, the younger guys would get in the ring, roll around, for all the events. And Tracy Smothers, who's an unsung hero to a lot of the ECW younger guys, because he would get there, do drills and stuff like that, and cardiovascular stuff. So, our guys would work out with Killer Kowalski's guys. Well, this show, Killer Kowalski didn't come to this event. He didn't bring his students. And if, this kid Mass Transit had claimed he was trained by Killer Kowalski, we could have had Killer there to say, hey, he's not my student, this guy's obviously lying. So the kid lies about his age, lies about his experience, and walks around the locker room, and he has completely no etiquette whatsoever. When I was trained by Al, go in the locker room, put your bags down, sit down, mouth closed, ears open, yes sir, no sir. Mass Transit walks around, there's stuffs, for the boys. He's going up, drinking in the drinks, and he pops down next to Taz and lights up a cigarette, which, if Taz is clean living, Taz doesn't drink, doesn't smoke. This kid's like lighting up a cigarette, and Taz is like, what the fuck? So I was like, let me get away. No, I don't want to witness this. But apparently they were going over the match, which again, if you were trained properly, you would know just to listen and ask, what am I doing in the match? Like my first big name I ever worked was McFoley as Cactus Jack in a tag match, and I didn't even think to suggest anything to McFoley, Cactus Jack. He's the veteran. He's going to tell me what to do. So the kid goes up to Devon Dudley and the Gangsters and says, hey, this is what I want to do, which is like all 3 of them, the veterans of the locker room, go, no, this is what we're doing. And he insisted, and I think he even insisted, the midgets get involved with the match too, which I don't know. If I'm in somebody's locker room for the first time, just mouth closed, ears open. So it got to the point where he really just aggravated the situation where, if he would have just went in and did what he was told, he probably would have had it. Because I was a young guy too, and I wrestled New Jack, and New Jack was fine with me. I said, what are we doing? He let us know, and if he thought of an idea for me, he would tell me what to do. And it's unfortunate because I watched the match too as it happened. There's a little area where you go up these steps and see over the curtain. It was brutal. It was brutal. And then, like I've said before, anybody with experience would know this. There's a lot of things a person with experience would know to do. And a person with experience and proper training would know, never let somebody else cut you. Don't ever let somebody else blade you, because you know your pain threshold. You know your pain threshold. First day with the new math. Sorry. You know how deep is too deep. Whether it's a scratch or a poke or whatever. Somebody else gigging you don't do it. It's not safe. It's not sanitary. And he went to New Jack and said, "Hey, can you cut me?" Oh, if you're asking somebody to gig you, New Jack's the Leonardo da Vinci of blading. If you're going to say somebody come look at their own forehead, and New Jack's forehead looks like a MapQuest of pro wrestling, and so like I said, it's so unfortunate that Killer Kowalski wasn't there to say, nah, he's full of shit. It's unfortunate that the kid lied to get into the locker room, lied to get in on the match, lied about his experience, lied about about his age. And I mean, if you go back in history, this happened, in the WWE with the Chuck Austin incident, where the guy just showed up and lied about his experience and wound up getting paralyzed in the ring by Marty Jannetty. So you think people would just learn from, it's an unfortunate incident of history repeating itself. No, when you train to wrestle, it's not like you go to DeVry Institute and you get a certificate of pro wrestling. Hey, this is my completion stage of pro wrestling. There's nothing like that. You go by somebody's word, or word of mouth, and there's no way to vet this kid's facts or lack of facts and his lies. So unfortunately, because somebody lied about their experience, age, a company almost got shut down, and a lot of people almost lost a lot of work and opportunity, and it's a shame for everyone involved.
And what was the drug scene like in ECW? Was it as bad as people say it is, or is it exaggerated?
It might be par for the course from what the stories I've heard. In a lot of ways, maybe I was naive, because I was always just a beer drinker. But I mean, guys did stuff. And to me, it was never always out in the open. Except for maybe an occasional scent of marijuana or weed or whatever you prefer to call it. As far as I know, the hardest thing I ever saw somebody do was smoke a joint or drink a beer or drink alcohol. But there's other legendary stories that I wasn't privy to. Maybe I was invited, and quite frankly, I'm insulted. No, I'm just kidding. Meanie's a square. But our locker room was a lot like the movie Slapshot, which is pretty cool, because we actually filmed we wrestled where they filmed one time. But the ECW locker room was part Misfit Toys, part Slapshot. Our crowd was like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, because they knew the show, they knew the characters, they knew the chants, and they knew when to sing and stuff like that. But as far as the drug scene, ECW, it probably is what it is, and maybe with a little bit of an embellishment for cult status.
Now, when Beyond the Mat was being filmed and they were shooting some scenes in ECW, did that change how you guys acted backstage or anything at all?
Oh, absolutely not. When Beyond the Mat was being filmed, we were so focused on our first pay-per-view, because that was a lot of pressure to be a part of ECW's first pay-per-view, because there was hints of an initial pay-per-view, and then with the mass transit incident, that put our pay-per-view aspirations on ice for a little while. But thank God for the ECW fans, and there's a fan movement called Strictly ECW, which was a website started by guys like Tony Lewis, Chris Woodward, Mike Johnson, and they rallied the troops to get the cable companies to reconsider us for our first pay-per-view, because the mass transit incident happened, and then Senator John McCain was on this crusade to shut down UFC. So everybody thought we were like UFC and extreme fighting and stuff like that. And so when the Beyond the Mat crew was around, I just assumed it was part of the pay-per-view production, because we went from doing stuff with Ron and Charlie and Ron and Charlie's house to filming stuff there. And you walk into the ECW arena the day of Barely Legal, and there's nice lights. They painted the floor, and there's this other film crew walking around, and I signed a release, and stuff like that. But I figured it was just for the pay-per-view, which in hindsight it doesn't matter anyway. I really thought Beyond the Mat was an excellent documentary, but it really didn't change. Nothing really changed how we acted or conducted business, except for the fact that we had to stick to our times a little bit more, because now we're on live TV. And as legend goes, at Barely Legal, we were like 30 seconds from going off the air, and the world not seeing the end of our main event. And then, the powers applied to the building died, and just another crazy, reason why ECW was the luckiest little promotion that was,
And you mentioned the mass transit incident before. I forgot to ask you this at that time. Is it true that New Jack actually dated Terry Reynolds for a while?
Yeah, I believe. New Jack dated Terry Reynolds, but other than that, I don't know any details. You see photos on Facebook. Oh, that's cool. I like Terry. I like Jack. So
just seems like an odd couple.
It's love. Love is blind, I guess. But if they got along and they were happy together, more power to them. But I don't know how long that was or any details. Other than Facebook photos. So that's about all I know about that.
Were you around when Steve Austin had his little run in ECW?
I first started wrestling in ECW. Well, I started appearing in ECW I started showing up around like September of '95, and then I went to the then hotel of ECW before we got kicked out. It was called the Travel Lodge, which many of us dubbed the Cylinder of Sin, because it was a spherical building, and so many things that happened in that building. You should just put a condom on the building from the roof down, just to quarantine it. But the first time I interacted with Steve Austin was at the Travel Lodge, and we went there. I went there to grab Raven and Stevie, and Steve Austin came along for the ride. And being young and stupid, and just having a car for the first time, being green with having a car, I kept every spare tire I ever owned in the trunk of my car, because God forbid maybe I get 4 flats at the same time. Who knows? Being young and stupid. So Raven gets in the front seat, Stevie gets in the back, and Austin was like, "Hey, can I throw my bag in your trunk?" And I open it up, and there's like 4 spare tires. He goes, "God damn, kid." So Steve Austin has this big bag, and he squeezes it in the back of my Dodge Aspen, which looked like an undercover cop car at the time. And he's sitting there. I'm like, man, Steve Austin must really hate me right now. But that was my first interaction with Steve Austin, was cramming him in the back seat of my 1977 Dodge Aspen to take him on thank God, a short trip from the Travel Lodge to the ECW arena. But Steve was cool. To this day, Steve Austin's a great guy. He is the same guy, bionic redneck, metalhead, lover of all things cool, and even though he's probably, Steve Austin could easily be on the Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling, just as being a draw in this business, but he's still the most down-to-earth dude there is, and the wrestling business is better for having him in it, because I know guys who, when I went to the WWE, there's guys who worked for WWE during the Hogan era, and there's guys who worked in WWE during the Steve Austin era, and they said, they compared, what they did, and Steve Austin, Hulk Hogan brought the wrestling business out of the smoky arenas and stuff like that and brought it to the bright lights. But then, during that, that period of that downtime when wrestling was really in the lean years, Steve Austin, lit the cannon, and boom, the business exploded, with Steve Austin, and then The Rock, and then Triple H, and the Attitude Era. But, a lot of that Attitude Era came from ECW, and fortunately Steve Austin was part of both.
And Brian Pillman also had a big part to do with that. Did you have any experiences with him during his run there?
Yeah, Brian Pillman had just got himself unbooked from WCW. He got himself released from WCW, and he just started showing up in ECW. And that was around the time I'd start coming back around ECW shows, because I had trained with Al for a little bit. I moved back to Jersey, started going back to ECW shows, and hooked up with Stevie and Raven. And then once I became the Blue Meanie, and Brian Pillman was there, he was living the gimmick. Everything you heard about him being in character with the loose cannon gimmick was all real. You'd be in the hotel lobby at the Travelodge, the Cylinder of Sin, and Brian Pillman would barge out from the hotel bar, run through the lobby, and go outside and start slamming the doors of the hotel like, "Oh, you motherfuckers, you," and go up, and we're like, "Holy shit!" He totally. Everybody goes, "Oh, kayfabe is dead." Kayfabe was not dead to Brian Pillman. He kept up that character all the time. But I had one cool interaction with Brian, and unfortunately it was probably like the last time he was in. Brian had just had his car accident where his truck flipped, and unfortunately, and he had to have surgery on his leg, and he was confined to a wheelchair, which was so heartbreaking, because he was such a high flyer and such a great wrestler, to see a guy who have to sit in a wheelchair for a while. But like, I'm sitting there, and if you ever went into an ECW locker room back in the day, everybody sat in the same exact spots. So-and-so sat there, blah blah blah. So I'm in my normal spot, and it's right by the one door in the locker room, and I'm sitting there putting on my knee pads, putting on my boots, and Brian Pillman comes in. He comes in through the one entrance in his wheelchair. I turn around and goes, "Meanie, I see you've been keeping up with my ab routine." And he gave me a little wink, and I popped, and it's just a cool little moment between a young guy in the business and a guy who I respected and enjoyed watching, wanting to become a wrestler, and just to have a cool little interaction with Pillman like that is one of the many cool stories in this business I've been able to experience.
And we just did a very good shoot interview with Shane Douglas. Do you have any comments about your experiences with him?
Shane Douglas was awesome. Again, I was only in the wrestling business a year and a half before I went to ECW, and the fact that guys would go out of their way to help me meant the world to me, because a lot of people tried to get it into ECW, and not everybody stuck. If you didn't immerse yourself into that locker room and fit in, the ECW guys policed themselves pretty good. If you weren't cut out, you didn't hang around. And the fact that a guy like Shane Douglas would help me here and there, because there was a series of times where Sandman was brutal with that Singapore cane. I laugh about it now, but sometimes he would hit you, and it felt like you were getting hit by a Louisville Slugger. And sometimes he would cane you in the head, sometimes he'd get you in the nose, sometimes he'd get you in the teeth. One time, Sandman caned me right here perfectly in the forehead, and I reached over and he yanked a thing of skin off my back to where I went to lay down. I went to take a shower, and so as like the soapy water hit down, I'm like, ah. But there was a moment where in upstate New York, Orange County Fairgrounds, and we had done something with Raven. We weren't the BWO yet. We're still a Raven, but we all, it was always feed in. Raven would go down, feed in. Same with whack one, whack the other, whack me, whack Nova, whack Stevie. And he whacked Stevie, and for whatever reason, Stevie just went down and his legs went to jelly, and they were worried about Stevie, and Shane spoke up, and it's like, hey man, maybe you should take it a little bit easy on these kids. And during the week, my phone rings, I pick it up, and it's Shane. Hey Brian, how you doing? Shane Douglas. And I go, hey Shane, how you doing? He's like, you all right? I know Stevie got hurt from that cane. How you feeling? You okay? I'm like, I'm good, but thank you for calling. And then we start talking about heavy metal, because he's a big metalhead like me. But if I had a match, another cool thing about ECW, you could go out and have a match. You walk through the curtain and somebody will pull you aside, hey, this is good, but maybe try that or try this. And plenty of times, Shane Douglas was that guy that, pull me and anybody in the locker room and say, hey, this is cool, but do another thing. And I have to give Shane credit because he, made him along with guys like Terry Funk, Sabu, Taz, made ECW a place you would want to try to get into because it seemed like the next big thing. I remember those early ECW shows where, there was barely a crowd, and ring announcer Bob Ortiz would have to get on the mic and say, hey, if you want to be seen on television, come fill the bleachers. I'm trying to make everybody get on the opposite, the opposite side of the hurricane, so the crowd would look full. But then, there's Shane Douglas, Sabu, and Terry Funk drew our first legit sellout with the night the line was crossed. And that attendance was built on, that feud with, Shane Douglas, Sabu, and Terry Funk. And then Shane Douglas cut the promo of all promos, with Sherry Martel and Todd Gordon. And just, the first time you see somebody swear in a wrestling promo, even though they beeped it, he swear, he said the F word. Finally, I put to rest the fucking Funk family. You're like, oh my God, he just swore. That means he really meant that shit, So, he was one of the forefathers of ECW, and being a young guy in the company, the fact that he embraced me into the company along with all the other guys who were the patriarchs of ECW and Extreme Wrestling and all that stuff. It was I'm singling out Shane, but it was a group effort. But Shane was one of the guys that, was the trailblazer and helped legitimize ECW because he had come from, WCW and NWA, and he was tag teaming with, Ricky Steamboat and doing all these cool things. So the fact that he gave a shit enough to give me some advice was invaluable. I never got paid $1 million in this business, but one thing I did get paid royally in was experience and, friendships. Very fortunate to this day to, say Shane Douglas, is my friend and gave me some valuable experience.
Now, can you tell us about the formation of the BWO?
The formation of the BWO was just a natural evolution of what we had already been doing in ECW. One night, me and Stevie and Raven were driving to the ECW arena, and Raven had the idea for us to do a parody of the Fabulous Ones. And we were going to start calling ourselves the Fabulous Ones, doing the Fabulous Fargo Strut. From the Fabulous Ones, we start doing different parodies. We were the Blue Meanie Bloods, the early Eating. I was Bobby Eaton, and he was Lord Stevie, for Steven Regal. And we would come out with the powdered wigs and the hats, and I would put the Union Jack on my wrists, and cheerio. And from there, I became Blue Dust, and he was Baron Von Stevie, and then I was Colonel Blue Meanie for Colonel De Beers, and we were just doing all these parodies, and then eventually Raven found Supernova, Mike Bucci, to become part of the fold, of the Dog and Pony show that was Raven's flock in ECW, and it just became, that. From there, we did a parody of Kiss. Kiss was just, coming around for the reunion tour and wearing the makeup again, so why not? We did. The Kiss parody is probably right up there with me with the BWO, but the next evolution, it was obvious, was to do a parody of the biggest, faction in the wrestling at the time, which was the New World Order. And I had been talking to Al Snow about different ideas. I was like, "Yeah, man, we should definitely do the New World Order." But hey, man, we could call ourselves the Blue World Order because blue rhymes with new, and Al popped for it, and we're just going back and forth. I was like, I could be the blue guy instead of the bad guy, and I gauged Al's response to my ideas, and I pitched it to Stevie, which Stevie pitched it to Raven. Raven pitched it to Paulie, and the BWO was supposed to be just a one-night idea, a one-night parody, which became just this thing that blew up, because we went out there, we did the BWO debut. And just the crowd reaction when we got back to the locker room, Todd Gordon came over and says, "I think we have something with this," and Paulie was like, "Wow." So then the idea of doing the T-shirts came up, and the BWO shirt the BWO shirt became the top-selling T-shirt in ECW history. I would hear back from the merchandise girl, Bella, and she would say, "Yeah, we sold about 200, 300 shirts tonight." Yeah, they were doing 200 BWO shirts a night around the loop, and then as we went, back, it dwindled and dwindled and dwindled. But just and that launched Stevie into the stratosphere as far as ECW title contention, and being a part of the first ever ECW pay-per-view where Stevie wrestled Terry Funk and Sandman for the right to wrestle Raven in the main event of our first ever pay-per-view. So just a little conversation that was just like me riffing on ideas with Al Snow became one of the best angles / parodies all of us have done, because to this day, if you watch Monday Night Raw or a WWE pay-per-view, you'll see a random BWO shirt in the crowd, and people send me a message on Twitter or Facebook, "Hey man, there's a BWO shirt," or somebody in the crowd take a photo and send it to me, and it's beyond flattering that we just passed the 20th anniversary of the debut of the BWO. The fact that I'm sitting here talking to you about it is just awesome, because everybody's looking, and when you get into business, you want that one thing, to help people remember you. I have a lot of friends who are musicians. I have a lot of friends who are musicians. They're like, "Man, I just want that one kung fu fighting," for people to write that one-hit wonder. And not the BWO was a one-hit wonder, but it was the biggest thing we did, and the fact that people still talk about to this day is just mind-blowing.
Now, you don't hear too many people in the business say anything negative about you or Stevie Richards, but Nova has a little bit of heat with some people,
Well, Nova's got heat with me because he's a Dallas Cowboys fan. So that's our biggest point of contention is I like the Philadelphia Eagles. He likes the Dallas Cowboys. But I love Nova. I mean, I'm sure... The thing I hate about the wrestling business is I could have a friend here who I love dearly. I could have a friend here who I love dearly. This friend loves me dearly as well, and this friend loves me. But these two friends hate each other, and if somebody's got to deal with an issue with Nova, that's between them. Nova, I'll say this, Nova is one of the people who really helped me in this business because, when Steve had left for WCW, and we were kind of like, man, what the hell do we do? We weren't mad or anything. It was just like, what do we do now? Nova really helped me. Every weekend, if we had a show, I would take the Greyhound. I didn't have a car at the time. I would take a Greyhound bus from Philadelphia to Brick, New Jersey. Nova would pick me up, and I would hang out with Nova and his identical twin brother Donnie, which that's a whole nother story with their fucking rivalry with football. But the Bucci family put me up, let me stay at their house. The Bucci family would feed me dinner, and the Bucci family treated me like I was their own son. So, if somebody has an issue with Nova, it's between them. I love Mike Bucci. He really pushed me to get better when we were tag teaming, and he would get me in the ring and just help get my cardio up, and we came up with ideas for us as a tag team. And then the watershed moment was when we debuted as a tag team, as a unit on WrestlePalooza '98 against the FBI, and had some of the best matches of my career with Tracy Smothers and Little Guido. And we were wrestling each other every night, and I learned so much from not only Nova, but Little Guido, who's an excellent wrestler, underrated wrestler, and Tracy Smothers, who's an unsung hero to many of the young guys in ECW, because he would take us to the side and teach us. To wrestle with those three every night was some of the best nights of my life.
What led to you jumping to the World Wrestling Entertainment?
I always said that I came along in the wrong decade, because if it was the 80s, my character probably would have been perfect for 1980s WWE or WWF. It was just I'd been given an opportunity to go there because of Vince Russo. Vince Russo Vince Russo was a big ECW fan, and he watched a lot of ECW and borrowed a lot from ECW. WWE borrowed a lot from ECW during the Attitude Era, and before I officially made the jump, there's an opportunity for me to go to WWE and do a parody of the Nitro Girls, and they wanted me to come out and be the Raw Boy, because I'd done that dancing thing in ECW, which I'm a horrible dancer, by the way. I don't even know how I got known for dancing. It looks like I'm having a seizure. But they wanted me to come in and be the Raw Boy. And here's like one of the cruel sides of wrestling. Not really cruel, but it's kind of fucked up. I was booked without my knowledge to be the Raw Boy on Monday Night Raw in Baltimore, Maryland. Didn't know about it. Till one night I was on AOL, which, remember when AOL was a thing? I was on Instant Messenger, and Al Snow sends me an instant message. What happened? Al, I don't know. What are you talking about? Dude, you're supposed to be at Raw. You were booked. What happened? It's like, Al, I have no idea what you're talking about. Turns out, Vince Russo had approached Chris Candido about using me to be the Raw Boy. So Candido, because Candido was always at WWE TVs when he was in ECW, because he was with Sonny. So apparently he said he went to Paul and got the okay from Paul for them to book me. So they had me booked for Raw in Baltimore. They had music picked out, all this stuff. I was on the lineup sheet and everything. They just didn't tell me. And as far as WWE was concerned, I no-showed WWE. So, Al Snow, I was on the lineup sheet. They had music picked out for me, and everything was a go, but there was no Blue Meanie to show up to be Raw Boy. So Al Snow reached out to me, and I explained to him, hey, Al, I had no idea. And I think at that point I got on the phone and talked to him, about it. He's like, oh man, this must be a rib. So thank God for Al. Al went back to Vince Russo and said, Meanie swears he had no idea. And then, Russo goes, that goddamn Paulie. So apparently, they ribbed the WWE, but unfortunately I was the pawn in this rib. And when I found out about that, I was like, if this opportunity ever comes up to go to the WWE, there's really no turning back, because hopefully there's even an opportunity. Hopefully that bridge hasn't been burnt, and hopefully my reputation as a person hasn't been affected by the fact that they thought I no-showed. So flash forward again, Norm Connors comes into the equation. I went and when I was in ECW, I would still do other indies. I did a show for Norm Connors and then drove home the next day. I get home, and this before cell phones and all that stuff. I had a message on my voicemail or my answer machine. Remember those? And it's Al Snow. Hey, Meanie, give me a call. I got a question. Call me back. So I called Al. I was like, hey, what's up? He goes, what's your relationship with ECW? I was like, I love working there. What's up? Are you contractually obligated to him? No. He's like, so if an opportunity were to arise, would you want to go to the WWE? I'm like, absolutely. You didn't even have to say E or F at the time. You go to the WWE. Yes, I'm interested. All right, I'll call you right back. Al calls Russo, and then I guess Russo calls Pritchard. I get a phone call, pick it up, and it's Bruce Pritchard. Hey, Brian, need your information, name, address, social security, all that stuff, and show up Sunday at 10 a.m. because they were doing Sunday Night Heat in Philly, but it was usually the call time for a WWE event is 1 o'clock, but this one was at 10 a.m. because there was a game that night. It was either the Sixers or the Flyers. Show up at 10 a.m. for Sunday Night Heat. Click, and my knees automatically almost just went from under me. I almost went down like somebody, like two bombs went off of my knees. I almost collapsed, or like right there. I was like, oh my God. So I lived in a one-story apartment, and my bedroom was right next to the living room, and I walked to the living room, opened the door. Of course, I didn't walk through the wood. I walked into the living room, and there was my mom and my grandma. I said, hey, I called my grandma then, hey Ma, Nan, put all the bills in my name. What? So at that time I was with ECW. I wasn't making that much, but yeah, put all the bills in my name. Why? I just signed with the WWE, and my grandma, too, her knees buckled. She had that Edith Bunker noise, that voice, like, oh my God, and they came over and hugged me, and I said, from now on, you're never going to have to worry about another thing in your life. I got it. Because in this business, everybody says, "Oh, I paid my dues in this business." Well, sometimes families pay dues too. And while I was, traveling the Northeast, playing wrestler, or not playing wrestler, but pursuing my dream of wrestler, not making a dime, and my grandma and my mom helped me along the way. It was only right for me to pay it forward and make their lives as comfortable as they made mine while I was pursuing my dream, and probably one of the greatest days of my life.
I can imagine. So you mentioned Vince Russo was a fan of yours, or a fan of ECW. What was your first meeting with Vince Russo like?
The first time I met Vince Russo was the night ECW had invaded WWE for Monday Night Raw.
Oh, actually, could you tell that story as well? I forgot to ask you about that. That was quite an
episode. It's great. I'm staying at home. You're in the business, but you're still a fan. And every Monday night, I'm watching Monday Night Raw just like everybody else. And I'm sitting there watching, and all of a sudden, Jerry Lawler starts running down. There's a fan with an ECW sign. He rips up the sign, starts talking trash on ECW. I'm like, oh, that was awkward. Kind of cool, but awkward. Then out of nowhere, Paul E calls into the live feed of Monday Night Raw, and starts talking trash to Lawler. They're cutting promos on each other back and forth. And Paulie, wow, we'll be there next week on Monday Night Raw. And I'm like, oh, holy shit, this is kind of cool. And then Jerry Lawler goes, oh, who are you going to bring? The Blue Meanie? I was like, oh my God, Jerry Lawler just said my goddamn name on Monday Night Raw. I'm trying not to mark out, but I'm marking out. So we go to the TVs the next week, and Paulie pulls us aside and says, the BWO, along with, the Eliminators, gave us all the name, your book for Monday Night Raw. Awesome. Fucking cool, right? Because we were trying to, build up our first pay-per-view, so this is great exposure. So we go through that weekend shows. That Monday, we all, me, Stevie, Raven, drive up to Tommy Dreamer's house, and from there we do a caravan from Tommy's house all the way down to the Manhattan Center, and we all meet up. We all have our ECW jackets and shirts and gear on, and as like a team, like a sports team, walk into the building. And this is like maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon or noonish, and there's people lined up already outside for Monday Night Raw, which is going to be I believe it was 8 o'clock at the time, and we kind of got like an ECW chant walking in the building. And then the cool thing was just walking in on the set, because we were in the world's most famous bingo hall, ECW, where the roof leaked when it rains and it was 100 degrees in the summer, and here we were walking into a professionally lit studio with a nice ring and catering. And we walk in, it was surreal. It was very cool. And I remember there was an issue when we first got to the building, because they're like, okay, your locker room's up these flights of steps, and like a bunch of ants, we march up the steps. Oh no, you're dressing down here. And Taz was like, they're already ribbing us, brother. They're fucking ribbing us. And we're just popping or whatever. And then we're walking around, and I introduced myself to everybody, as you do, and we walk into where catering is, and besides being on Monday Night Raw, one of my favorite moments was Tommy Dreamer walking up to me, and his very serious face, he goes, Meanie, I'm having a hard time keeping my game face. I was like, why? He goes, they have cheesecake. Tommy Dreamer, the innovator of violence, the most hardcore of the hardcore, who did the chair shot, heard around the world, took cheese graters to the forehead, got chokeslammed from every angle of the ECW arena by Brian Lee with every table. His weakness is cheesecake. So I popped for that. So but then the reality sets in that we're going to be on live TV, and kind of go through like a run through of what we're doing, and then it's game time. You get dressed, and at the time the BWO was kind of doing the NWO thing, where we didn't come through the regular entrance, we came through the crowd. So we had to figure out a way for us to go through the crowd from the locker room. So we're walking through. And there's a part of the Manhattan Center which was like Command Central. It's like looking at it's like you're on the Enterprise in Star Trek. Monitors everywhere, and people at control stations and hitting buttons and that, and you're seeing angles that aren't even on TV yet, and this and stuff, and you're just like, wow. And we're walking through there in our half shirts and Daisy Dukes, with the one guy who's leading us to the entrance, and we just stop and like look, and they're like, who are these guys in a half shirt and Daisy Dukes just hanging out here? They're like, can you please not stand over our shoulders? So we go into this little stairwell that led out to the door to where we were going through to make our entrance. And no matter how much you wrestle, or how many taped matches you do. The first time you know you're about to be on live TV is just the most nerve-wracking thing. I was winded just from nerves. Your mouth is dry and your heart's in your throat. But once that music kicked on, and Paulie, teased us coming out and they hit the BWO music. If you watch us run, we could have probably ran through a brick wall. And the big rib of it was like I hopped over the rail and Stevie hops over after me and kind of gives me this little shove like, nah. So the next weekend everybody's ribbing Stevie. Did you see Stevie push Meanie out of the way? And ribbing him about. But we got to throw. We look out in the crowd and there's BWO shirts and you're looking at the thing and there's the red lights on and all this stuff, and it's just like the most surreal thing to be this kid who grew up a severe asthmatic in Atlantic City that nobody thought I was ever going to be a professional wrestler, and then within a year and a half I'm in one of the hottest wrestling promotions in ECW, and then in a couple of years I'm on live television with my best friends invading the WWE with the coolest company in the wrestling world at the time, ECW, to promote our first ever pay-per-view. It was surreal. And then the next weekend, Paulie comes to us and says that the wrestle one of our greatest opponents of all time, Little Guido. Little Guido is, again, one of the most underrated wrestlers, one of the best wrestlers ECW had, to wrestle Little Guido. And the next weekend, Paulie had said that the quarter hour rating that we were on beat Nitro, because apparently people they're making fun of the NWO on WWE, and the BWO was the first time that Vince McMahon had publicly acknowledged the New World Order. He goes, these guys, the Blue World Order, take off of the clothing line, New World Order. So he wouldn't even say a wrestling fashion. He's like, the clothing line, New World Order. So from that point on, people are like, people are making fun of the NWO and to watch us. And it was one of the coolest things I ever got to do.
It's hard to believe wrestling was that exciting at one point.
Dude, that era, I mean, I always loved wrestling, and I would watch it every week religiously, no matter what. I would scan the channels looking for wrestling that wasn't even listed on TV. Saturdays, everybody's going to the park, playing sports, and I'm sitting at home, with the controller. I'm watching my normal WWE, and then eventually we got Jim Crockett Promotions. I would find wrestling from Hawaii on the Financial News Network that had like the little, stock market ticker at the bottom, or anything. At midnight, ESPN would have, AWA and stuff like that. But then they started getting into the pay-per-views. But then came along, the Monday Night Wars. And we had talked about, wrestling in Philadelphia. Philadelphia was a test market. Philadelphia was the precursor to the Monday Night Wars, too, because, there would be occasional times where WWE were on the Spectrum and Jim Crockett Promotions were in the Civic Center. Exact same night, exact same time, and they would both have packed houses. So that was a little bit, that was a precursor to the excitement that would lead up to the Monday Night Wars, where you never knew who was going to show up on WCW. You never knew what was going to happen on Raw. And they were trying, and thankfully for that, that era, because WWE had become a little bit complacent. This lit a fire under the WWE, under Vince McMahon's ass to, overtake the wrestling world. And thank God he did, because, there was a lot of times where, there's a lot of lean years in the WWE, and thank God for Stone Cold came along, and also 316. But that era of wrestling, and to be a part of it, there were the WWE was up here, WCW was up here, ECW might have been here, but it was always called the Big Three. ECW was, nobody ever said, the big two companies. ECW was considered part of that sphere of success and notoriety, that it was called the Big Three. So, it was a good time to be in the wrestling business.
So you encountered Vince Russo for the first time at that Monday Night Raw episode?
Yes, short story long. I encountered Vince Russo for the first time at Monday Night Raw, and I believe he had just started becoming a writer at the time. He had just done stuff for the magazine. He was doing the Saturday morning show Live Wire with his character Vic Venom or something like that. And he was just starting to find his way, and he was very cool, very approachable, very welcoming, and would talk to us, and we had conversations with him and everybody else there. And then along the line, he watched ECW, and he came up with the idea for me to come into ECW and as the Raw boy. And when that fell through, luckily they came up with an idea for me to come to the WWE and be a part of the Job Squad, which was awesome because Philadelphia has always been a big part of my life. I debuted, I was born in Philadelphia. I became a wrestling fan in Philadelphia, and then I debuted in ECW in Philadelphia, and I debuted in WWE in Philadelphia. So I'm going to debut in my hometown with, the guy who trained me. The guy who is, the reason for me being in the wrestling business at all, Al Snow, who all the times I wanted to quit, then he would talk me out of it, and he became my big brother in the business. I had a sister, but I never had a brother. He was my big brother. So, Russo asked him to bring me in, and off we went with the Job Squad.
Did Russo say bro as much in those days as he's gone on today?
I think the Russo bro thing is just he would say bro, hey bro, how you doing, bro? But yeah, I think now that it became more noticeable, I think he plays it up a little bit. But everybody wants to give Vince Russo shit, but he did play a part in the wrestling business, and he had a positive influence on my life. So I love the guy. Vince Russo and Vince McMahon was like Reese's peanut butter cups. The chocolate and the peanut butter, they worked well together, and they might work separate. But when Vince Russo had the Vince McMahon filter to reconfigure his idea, that's when it worked out the best. And Vince Russo, like I'm saying, he's a very smart guy, very bright guy. But when he had that Vince McMahon governor on him, probably when some of his ideas worked the best. Because I got to say, I didn't watch the Russo era of WCW. I didn't watch TNA, when Russo was there. But
And you did an angle with Ken Shamrock and Ryan Shamrock. How did you enjoy that angle?
That was great. I'd become paired with... At first I was feuding with Goldust as Blue Dust. And then we became paired up because we're two colorful characters. No pun intended, him being gold, me being blue. But we're two, similar characters, and I forget how his fascination with Ryan Shamrock came up, but I started becoming jealous of his fascination. First day with the new mouth, I apologize. I became jealous of his fascination with Ryan Shamrock, which led to some good moments, some that aired, some that didn't, just because of time, which is another thing. In WWE, you could be booked for a show, and you could be at the gorilla position ready to go out, and they go, your segment's cut. As you're waiting to go out, and you just have to go back and get dressed, So there was a moment where I had been calling Goldust my mommy, going, hey, oh, my mommy. And we did a promo on Sunday Night Heat in Dayton, Ohio, explaining the origins of why I call him mommy. He's like, anybody could be a good father. There's been great fathers throughout the history of the world. Darth Vader and the dad from Leave It to Beaver, Ward Cleaver, but nobody. Only one wrestler could be a good mother. Well, it was better than I described it, but we were having a rainstorm and the satellite feed went out and nobody saw the goddamn promo. And they never bothered to have us redo it on another show or retape it or whatever. So I'm calling him mommy, and then like he's falling in love with Ryan Shamrock, and then I fall in love with her. I fight for his attention with Ryan, which led to Goldust having an issue with Ken Shamrock, because I called Ryan out. I got sick and tired of Shamrock and this and Shamrock that, and everybody's thinking I'm calling out Ken Shamrock, and out comes Ryan, and we have our face off, and I'm go to Spanker, but then Ken gets me, and which led to my only WrestleMania moment at WrestleMania 15 in my hometown of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Ken's a good dude. Ken's a great guy. Talk about a guy who could probably literally just kill you. But he's like the nicest guy in the world who could kill you. Him and Steve Blackman, two of the nicest guys who could probably just kill you with their pinky. But they were cool to work with. Ryan was a total sweetheart. And she was young too. She just maybe 19, getting into the business and stuff like that. And then all,
she was dating a few of the wrestlers too, wasn't she, or something?
Yeah, which is common in wrestling. It's like in the movie business when two people fall in love on a set, because they're around each other all the time. Wrestlers, you would tend to date wrestlers because they understand the business. But another thing that could be poisonous for dating another person in the business is that it could lead to a lot of jealousy and stuff like that, and you almost feel guilty for getting booked because you want to include your partner in getting that person booked. So if you get a booking and that person doesn't get a booking, that could lead to strife. It was common, because we get the business, we get each other, we get what we all have to go through, which a civilian life mate might not understand. The insanity of the wrestling business.
And now that we see Goldust still going strong in WWE, is there any chance Blue Dust make
brother? Have bags will wrestle. my bags are by the door. I'm ready. They're washed, but they're ready to. I'm ready to do anything, man. I almost had an opportunity to go back into the Rumble. Not this past one that was in Philly, but the one before that. And it came down to me and Bubba Ray Dudley, and they picked Bubba to be the ECW surprise. But hey, man, if they want, Blue Dust and Goldust, to go one more time, because that was another learning experience. Dustin's such a great guy, such a great wrestler, and I was fortunate he was cool with me doing the parody of his namesake, because not only did he take an idea that a lot of people didn't get at the beginning, he made it work. So for this kid to come along and call himself Blue Dust and do his mannerisms, he was very cool. He could have thumbs downed it and said nothing. I could have just sat on the sidelines, but he let me into his world, and I was very fortunate that Dustin got let me do it and work with him, because it was a constant try to pop each other kind of thing, with us being goofy and stuff like that. When
you were released from that run, it was just a matter of your contract expired, or?
Well, it was we had done WrestleMania 15, and then I went on an overseas tour with the WWE. We came back from the overseas tour. We were doing shows in Michigan, and Jim Ross and Bruce Pritchard pulled me aside and said, "Hey, got some bad news. We're gonna have to let you go." And probably the worst days of my life, because I harken back to the day I got signed. I told my grandparents, "Hey, put everything in my name," and it was really hard. It really sucked, and they told me I was being released, and I tried to plead my case, but the decision had been made. And I went off. I went to a locker room. I found a locker room. I found a stall, and I went to the bathroom, and I cried. And it really hit me. And I went up to, I found Al, I found Mick Foley. I was like, dude, they're releasing me. He's like, what? They were like, you really didn't get a chance to do anything yet, because I went there in November, and March comes around, and I had my first WrestleMania. I was only there for a couple months, so I kind of still lingered. That night we were booked against the Acolytes, against JBL and Farouk, and that's where they had me and Goldust split. Where Goldust turned on me and left me with the Acolytes to beat me. And for whatever reason, I kept. Normally they let you go and that's it, but they kept giving me airline tickets. I kept doing the house show loops. I came into another set of TVs, and then it turns out when word had broke on the internet that they were releasing me, there was this huge fan campaign called Save the Meanie, which I believe was some of the guys from Circle ECW, the same fans that got the pay-per-view companies to keep ECW's pay-per-view dreams alive. There's a website, Save the Meanie, and there's emails, phone calls, all the people saying, please keep the Meanie. And it got to the point where I went to the next set of TVs. Vince Russo came to me and said, bro, people have been emailing us, calling us, saying, keep the Meanie. And at one point, he said their email system had become inundated clogged with emails and stuff like that. And, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I was at home. I get a call from Jim Ross saying, there's been a reprieve from the warden. I think we're going to keep you, and we'll give you another chance. And I was like, awesome, thank you. And then I go to that series of TVs, which I think might have been in Chicago, and I run into Triple H in China at the airport. They're like, hey man, I heard you're staying here, cool, and Triple H and China were always awesome, also they're cool to me, and they didn't have to be, but Triple H goes, hey man, I heard you're sticking around, it's kind of cool. They never really gave you a shot, and that's when I got to I said thank you, and then that's when I got to TV, and Vince Russo pulled me aside and explained that there was a fan base that just got to the WWE and with emails and phone calls and stuff like that, keep the Meanie, and they decided to keep me, which I was blown away. Who am I? It's just like, you always wonder, if I ever, you look back, you go, man, was I good? Did I do okay? Why did anybody give a shit about me? But the fact that people gave a shit about me to fight to keep my job was fucking awesome.
What was the reason why JBL kind of attacked you in that Raw Battle Royal for the one night only?
Oh, the ECW one night stand.
Yeah.
I've talked about how certain things were a fortunate situation. It sucks for everybody involved, but my first go around in WWE from '98 to 2000, for whatever reason, just JBL didn't like me. When he was Bradshaw with the Acolytes, and I have all these theories in the world of why maybe he didn't like me or whatever. There was an incident where my first weekend into WWE, I debuted in Philly, and then we were going to do a shot in Baltimore, and then back when they did one live Raw and taped another Raw, so I did Sunday Night Heat, and then I did the live Raw, and then we were going to go up to, I believe, either New Haven or Hartford, Connecticut for the taped Raw that would air the next week. So I was, being an indie wrestler and this travel for ECW, I was just going to wrestle Philly, wrestle Baltimore, and then just drive straight up to Connecticut from Baltimore. A couple of hours, right? Earl Hebner goes, "No, stupid, we fly you now." So, okay, cool. I turned in my rental car, and he gave me my flight information. I go to the airport, I check in, I look at my ticket. Seat 1A. It's up front, right? That's close to the front of the plane, right? And I get to the airplane. I get on the airplane. I realize, holy shit, they gave me a first class seat, which I wasn't expecting. But the booking had been so last second. I mean, they booked my ticket either the day before or day of to fly from Baltimore to Connecticut. I didn't know what the fuck to do. And the moment I knew I was in trouble, I sit picture this, first class, first row of seating, Blue Meanie, big boss man, across the aisle, Shawn Michaels, right? One of these things is not like the other. So I'm sitting there, and guys are coming on the plane, and they're like looking at me. I'm like, oh, they're like, looking at me like shocked that I'm sitting in first class. But the moment I knew I was in trouble, McFoley goes, "Oh, Meanie, no." "What, Mick, what?" "Oh, no, Meanie, oh." He's like, this look of concern. I was like, "Take me with you, Mick. Take me with you. Put me in your bag. Let me hide," So the flight's going on, and I'm just feeling it. My face is red. My tongue is getting fat. I'm just like, oh no. I just want, if there was a window next to me, I would sort of open it and done the Nestea plunge out, like, see you later. And from the back, you hear a voice boom out, "Why the fuck is the Blue Meanie in first class?" And I just wanted to shrink and die. I was like, oh my God. So I get off the plane, go to baggage claim. Everybody's giving me the eye. Everybody's like, Mark Henry goes, "You fucked up, man." I'm like, "I'm sorry." And then somebody finally went, "Hey, man, if that happens again, next time get up and offer your seat to a vet." Shit, why couldn't somebody tell me that before I went and sat in first class? Because I had never really flown ECW. I'm driving everywhere, You would drive from New Jersey. You would drive from New Jersey to New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm not used to flying, so I get on my first booked wrestling flight, and it happens to be in first class. So I don't know if that rubs a few people the wrong way, because when we got to the TV, and I'm pleading my case in the car. It's me, Al Snow, Mick Foley, and Bob Holly. I was like, "Dude, how bad is it? Did I really fuck up? Is somebody gonna shit in my bag? Please don't let anybody shit in my bag." And Bob Holly's like, "I don't think people shit in bags anymore." I was like, "Oh, thank God for that." I was like, I truly didn't know, and pleading my case, And then we get to TV, and then I get summoned to a room, and it's Jerry Briscoe and Jack Lanza. They go, "Look, we understand you're new. This was a mistake. It won't happen again." I was like, "Absolutely." And Bob Holly was with me, and Bob Holly is awesome. He stood up. He said, "You know what? Me didn't know it was a mistake," and he was just saying in the car how sorry he was and stuff like that. And but I don't know if that lingered on into the reason why maybe John didn't like me, or John had beef with me, or whatever. Yeah, that's why I kind of hate talking about the story again, because I don't want to open up old wounds, because eventually when the one night stand thing happened,
unfortunately it's just what you're remembered for best.
Yeah,
I think it's just because it's a rare thing in that time frame for that to happen on such an event with a lot of viewers. So that hasn't happened since, to my knowledge, in the WWE.
Right, and the weird thing is, it happened, right, and
your guard was down, right? You didn't have any.
I had no idea it was coming, except for the fact that I saw him staring at, we're doing a stare off, and we had practiced this too. WWE guys, ECW guys here. Hey, you, I'll kick your butt, all this stuff. And I think I yelled at JBL, I'll knock that cowboy hat off or whatever. Something goofy. You know, we had something we had practiced. And I look over and he's kind of like looking at me. I'm like, oh shit. But before the whole fracas broke out, like the DW guys, there was a guy, one of the Backlund brothers, bald head kid. I was like, hey man, we're never gonna probably have this chance again. Let's pair off. You know, go back and forth. You know, punch. So I'm the fracas breaks out. I'm looking for one of the Backlund brothers. And 2 nights before, Jeremy Borash had his version of an ECW reunion with the Hardcore Homecoming at the ECW Arena. And I got split open that night, hard way, back in my head, by Sandman. It was either a ladder or a chair. So much time was going by, I forget which, I'd have to watch it. So I go to the hospital, I get like 8 staples right there. One night stand, the fracas breaks out. And John finds me, and while I'm paired off with somebody else, he punches me right where I got my staples 2 nights before. I don't know if he knew or whatever, but just by shit luck, hit me around there. And you watch me go, holy shit, turn around, and he put my shirt over my face and started throwing live rounds. So I was like, fuck, like a hockey fight. Well, I ain't gonna take that. So I tried to snatch a headlock, and if you're gonna fight somebody, try to bring them as close so their punches don't have as much range. So I bring them in, and I'm trying to throw live rounds. So somehow we got separated, and I get so much blood in my eyes. People don't realize when you get blood in your eyes, everything starts looking like a kaleidoscope, it's like a weird kaleidoscope effect. I'm trying to clear my eyes out, and guys are coming up to me like fucking Benoit walks up and goes, some people thought I bladed. I was like, I know him. And he went off with somebody. Tracy Smothers came on and I was like, fucking JBL. I'm telling you, everybody's coming up to him. I'm like, hey, you just shot on me. And if you watch the tape, Sandman goes over with the Singapore cane, grabs him, and Tracy Smothers goes up to him and gives him a couple live rounds, and Bubba pulls him out. So we get back to the gorilla position, which is right behind the curtain. Vince is there and a bunch of people. Johnny Ace comes up to me and goes, who said you could blade? I was like, he shot on me. And I gave him the cliff notes of, he's never liked me, blah, blah, blah. Since my first time, blah, blah, blah. He never liked me. And, he's like, well, he apologized. Sorry, this unacceptable, stuff like that. And I also, it just occurred to me while I'm talking, when it had been released by WWE in 2000, I had done an interview with, I believe, either Mike Johnson or Buck Woodward for One Wrestling. I said, I enjoyed my time in WWE. I said, Bradshaw is a bully. That's all I said. And you know how the wrestling business is. When one person says something, it's like that game in school where you whisper something in somebody's ear, he turns around, whispers it to him, and by the time it gets around the room, it's morphed into something different. So I probably said JBL or Bradshaw was a bully, and by the time it left my mouth, went through somebody else's ears and mouth, and got back to him, probably morphed into something that was totally not what I said. Because when I got back to the gorilla position, JBL comes up and goes, you were talking about me on the internet. I was like, I'm so in shock. I'm trying to think, what the fuck did I say? And I was like, dude, what the fuck? This is a work. This business will work. We're not. Obviously, I was totally shocked and stunned that had happened because. I call it, the thing that sucks is, after it happened, I kind of wrote a couple, blogs about it, what I was going through and how I thought it sucked. And some of the wrestlers actually kind of turned on me going, oh, well, you never worked stiff before? I was like, it's not working stiff if somebody shot on me, I put my face out there. if you're hitting me full force, you know.
Stiff, you're not intending to injure the person.
Right.
You're going to feel it like a football tackle or something, but you're not trying to put the guy in the hospital.
Right. But then there's this side of wrestling that was like, oh, Blue Meanie's a pussy, he can't work stiff. But then there's this also faction, oh, Blue Meanie should probably sue the WWE and become a millionaire, which I still hear to this day. Like, I was at a show, an indie show, and I put my stuff at the merch table, and Mrs. Meanie was watching my stuff, and this wrestler who doesn't deserve to be named started talking shit about me right in front of her, as if like she wasn't going to. Blue Meanie's a fucking idiot. He should have sued WWE. He should have sued WWF. You know, he'd be a fucking millionaire now and not working these indies. I was like, oh, like you, asshole. You're working the indies too. And by the way, you know, I was like, oh, great. So the guy comes back and I was like, oh yeah, I just got my royalty check from WWE the other day. It's kind of cool, you know, like kind of let him know I fucking knew he was fucking talking shit about me. So I was like, fuck you, buddy. Get the crooked finger. But it was probably one of the most trying times of my life. You know, I grew up severe asthmatic. I was in the hospital my whole childhood in the oxygen tent. That sucked, but to have something happen so publicly, you know, and you're forever known about it, sucks. But, you know, they brought me out for SmackDown. It's July 4th, 2005. A couple months right after that. And we went in a room and we talked about it. And, you know, I show up to SmackDown and Johnny Ace goes, yeah, you're wrestling JBL tonight. I'm like, what? Yeah, you're going to do the moonsault, pin him 1, 2, 3. I was like, does John know this? Yeah, he's on board. I was like, oh man, I thought I was being set up. You know, I thought this whole thing was a fucking sub. They flew me out to California for this whole thing. And John comes up and goes, you want to talk? I was like, sure. So if you've ever been to WWE TV, you see signage everywhere. Catering, seamstress, you know, Vince's office. So I go, yeah, let's talk. So we're walking off, and we're walking to a part of the building where you're seeing fewer and fewer signs, and I'm like, oh man, where are we going? You know, it's like if we walk into a room and there's plastic on the floor, I know it's a mob hit, I'm running, you know. But we go in and me and John went in the room and he was like, he shuts the door behind him. I'm standing there like this. He goes, we could talk or we could fight. I was like, well, obviously I don't want to fucking fight you, John. And the thing is, the thing that also sucks is I was a fan of his, you know. Before I went to WWE, I was a fan of him. I loved the fucking cowboy thing he did and all that stuff. You know, he reminded me of Stan Hansen, and I remember him from Global Wrestling. I always dug his deal. And then for that to happen, I said to him, I was like, hey man, this sucks. I was a fan of yours, and then you did this, and that. And I explained everything, and he said, you know what? I don't remember any of that, but you know, I'm sorry. And he apologized, and he said, you know, I loved ECW. I loved the whole ECW thing. That's why, you know, I pitched to have guys like Axel and Balls come up here. He you know, told me how he pitched to have Balls Mahoney and Axel out and come in, and have some of the ECW guys come in and be used. And, you know, I liked ECW, and I was like, look, it's like we could get, you know, we can go and make some money off this. I was like, all right, you know, fuck. And we went and had the match, and then we did the deal with Batista did a run in because they were having a feud, and then it prolonged their feud, and it is also a chance to, you know, reunite with the BWO, because I came in with the BWO. And a lot of people don't know, prior to this whole JBL incident, Nova, Mike Bucci, who had been in talent relations, was pitching for me to come back because they were having Stevie go from Velocity to SmackDown. SmackDown's colors were blue and white, BWO's blue and white. He's like, I don't think Meanie would object to coming back for a couple months just to do this thing, and if it turns into something, cool. If it doesn't, I made a couple bucks, and then my indie value goes up for a couple months. So but then the JBL thing happened, and you know, we apologized, and then years later I'm sitting on Twitter, and somebody tweets to me, "Are my eyes deceiving me?" But it's just JBL following the Blue Meanie on Twitter. I was like, holy shit. He's like, yeah, I love the Blue Meanie. I think he's hilarious, blah, blah, blah. And followed back, and we keep in touch. And like I said, a couple years ago, WWE brought me and Stevie in to do ECW on Release Volume 3 with Joey Styles. And I said, hey, John, I'm doing this ECW DVD, Rumble's in town. It'd be a perfect way to promote the DVD. He's like, you know what? It's a good idea. And JBL went to Road Dogg and Michael Hayes, and it came down to me, and the last second they decided to go with Bubba, which awesome for Bubba, because he's a fucking legend, I just found out Bubba and Devon are going to the Hall of Fame today, which is a no-brainer. But the whole JBL thing was an ugly incident, and people are like, oh, people, to this day, people say, oh, JBL beat your ass, but it's like, come on, man. Giving me a break.
Well, there was also the surprise factor and the size difference, muscularity difference.
Yeah, look, I was never going to be Mr. Olympia in this business. Again, I keep saying, well, back when I was a severe asthmatic, growing up, I was severe asthmatic. I couldn't play sports, couldn't do anything. If I even attempted to lift little weights, I grew up in a house where Catholic guilt was like a big thing. My grandma would guilt, oh, please don't get hurt. Oh, you have trouble breathing. And, I couldn't play sports, and then by the time I finally got properly diagnosed for my asthma, I was able to start participating and stuff. I was going to go out for the wrestling team in my high school, Atlantic City High School. And they disbanded the wrestling team and stuff like that. But I had nobody in my life growing up. Okay, this is what a diet is. This is a workout routine is. This is what protein is. This is that. My grandmom's idea of giving me a salad was give me a piece of lettuce and tomato and put a little piece of mayonnaise on it. I knew nothing about like oil and vinegar and onions and all this stuff. And it wasn't until I got to WWE and there was a moment where Kevin Kelly pitched the idea to me to talk to Headbanger Masha's brother, who was a nutritionist at the time, and he probably talked to me about nutrition. And at the time WWE released me, I had lost. They released me for the second time. I had lost up to 160 pounds. And got in shape, and they always wanted me to get in shape. I went and lost 160 pounds, got in good shape, and they cut me. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because then I went on the Indies as the Blue Meanie, and I didn't look like the Blue Meanie. I'd show up for these bookings, and the fans are like, "You said the Blue Meanie's going to be here." That's not the Blue Meanie. He's too skinny. So I was like, "No, let me get back in meanie shape so I can make. I got bills to pay,
Yeah, it's true. It's associated with the look, obviously.
Yeah. People always go, "Oh, why don't you try this to do that?" I was like, "Well, I don't have the power of being on somebody's television to." People want to hear the hits. You go to see a rock band. If they start playing their new song, you go to the bathroom. Everybody you play Freebird, and they're like, "Yeah." So when I wrestle on these indie shows, I give them my equivalent of Freebird. Come out, do the dance, have a dance off, thumb wrestle with somebody, tickle them, get a little bit of heat, make my comeback, go home, meanie dance, bump out over the top rope, go to my merch table.
It's either that or get some type of bodysuit design that has the extra weight.
Yeah, I do the Elegante thing where I get like a fat suit with a Man, that Elegante outfit was bad. Like he had like the 70s bush and stuff like that.
Yeah, was he supposed to be naked?
Yeah, I don't know, man.
I don't know if he had any kids, so maybe he just didn't have any.
Yeah, Elegante was a eunuch. It was like a giant eunuch.
And you appeared in the movie The Wrestler, which was a huge hit. Any memories of that?
I was very fortunate to be in The Wrestler. I have a friend named Judah Freelander, very funny comedian. He's been in a lot of Ben Stiller movies. He was in a Dave Matthews video, but he's a tremendous stand-up comic. And I'd become friends with him He used to go to ECW shows back in the day too. He would always go to the shows in New York and Trent, New Jersey and stuff like that. So Judah was like heavily into wrestling and kind of does it like a wrestling character in a stand-up. He's champion of the world champion. And he got cast in The Wrestler. So he hits me up on either Facebook or Twitter. Hey man, can I give you a call? I go, okay, cool. So I call him. He goes, hey man, I got this part in the movie The Wrestler. And I had heard chirpings about The Wrestler because originally it was supposed to be Nicolas Cage instead of Mickey Rourke. And the director, Darren Aronofsky, and Nicolas Cage showed up to Ring of Honor to see, I guess either to work out plans to use Ring of Honor for some of the filming scenes and stuff like that, and then they switched over to Mickey Rourke. But Judah had been casted to be a wrestling promoter in the movie. He's like, hey man, I got cast in the movie The Wrestler. I got cast to be a wrestling promoter. Can I ask you some questions for some research? Sure. I'd run some shows. I'd had a promotion in 3PW, and I'd been on the other ends of a promoter either paying me or stiffing me or, stuff like that. So over 2 nights, we talked on the phone for a couple hours each night, and he's just asking me questions, and I'm telling him some, my opinion and some stories and stuff like that. So right before the second night, I was like, hey man, he's like, hey man, thank you so much. I was like, hey man, did any extras? I'm available. So he gave me a name and did contact, and I sent in my information. And then one random night, I get a phone call. Hey, this is so-and-so from the movie The Wrestler. We're filming at the arena tonight. You available? I was like, absolutely. So me and Mrs. Meanie run up the stairs into the bathroom. I threw some put a fresh coat of blue dye in my hair, and it was at the ECW arena, which is like a 10-minute walk from my house. I walked down, and it was like walking into seeing the ECW arena for Barely Legal, except they got the lights, and they got an array of tables with weapons and fake barbed wire. I was like, oh man, that would have came in handy back in ECW days. But it was pretty cool. I showed up, signed in, and we went over the gist of the idea for the scene. The scene I'm in The Wrestlers, spoiler alert, where Mickey Rourke's character Randy Ram has his heart attack, which is one of the main focal points in the movie, where he decides whether he should be a wrestler or retire and stuff like that. So talked to Darren Aronofsky for a little bit, gave me the gist of the scene, and we filmed it like 2 or 3 times just straight through. And then at the time, brain fart. At that time, the Wrestler hadn't been picked up by a major studio yet. So basically, it was just an independent film, and you got independent film pay. So that wasn't like I went in there with the expectations of making $1 million, but it was pretty cool to go in and film a movie that would go on to become such an acclaimed hit, because nobody knew at the time. Wrestling has always been shunned or frowned upon, and the thing about the movie, there's a section of people in the business who are like, yeah, a lot of this stuff happens, and there's a lot of people who thought it made the wrestling world look bad. But unfortunately, there is, a small section of the wrestling business where the wrestler really hits home for, and stuff like that. When's a good time to decide to, hang it up or, live off your past glory or stuff like that, or why do some of the things you do to, wrestle with like some of the crazy shit like barbed wire and glass and all that stuff like that. But I think the movie The Wrestler did, a section of the wrestling business a good justice. It did the wrestling business justice, because it showed that we're people too, and we're just like everybody else. We happen to live the life.
There's something wrong with this. So
To be in the wrestling business, you really need to have some sort of crazy side. I mean, you have to love it, and you have to be fucking crazy to want to be in this business, because why do we put up with the bullshit we put up with? You know, whether it's, you know, the long car rides where you get out of the car and you're too stiff to wrestle. You know, you feel like you've been in a wrestling match before you've been in a wrestling match, or you delayed flights, or, you know, canceled flights where you have to stay over an extra night and it's an extra night away from home. You know, people say, you know, like you said, you know, people have said good things about me, but there's, you know, times where the wrestling business has turned me into kind of a jerk, where you're just like, you're on the road, you know, 3 weeks at a time, and, you know, you get home for like 2 days and you go back out for another set of days, and there'd be periods of times where I would come home off the road and I didn't know what to do with being at home, so I'd go and stay at a hotel room in my hometown, well, you know, 10 minutes from my house, because I didn't know how to, you know, it's like kind of like the movie Shawshank Redemption, when they leave Shawshank, you know, what do I do with my life now? I've been used to this life for so long. And in a lot of ways, you know, the wrestler was like the movie Shawshank Redemption. What do you do? I mean, you know, the doctor goes to call him by his shoot name. He's like, no, call me Randy. You know, there's some people who are like that. You know, it's just the wrestling business could be a beautiful thing and it could be a cruel thing. But I've been fortunate enough to find my peace in it, and, you know, hopefully make my mark in it and do something. You know, I got to be, you know, the comic relief in a world where everybody wanted to be the badass. Because growing up, my three loves were music, wrestling, and comedy. I loved George Carlin, and I loved Ric Flair. So, you know, and I loved guys like Bam Bam Bigelow. Bam Bam Bigelow was a huge influence on me because he was a big guy, agile, do the moonsault and do cartwheels and stuff like that. He influenced me and made me think that, hey, I could be that agile big guy, because I'd never thought I was going to be Mr. Olympia, Mr. Bodybuilder guy. And in a lot of ways, maybe it helped me because I was something different on the card. So, and it was to my benefit. But, so the wrestling business afforded me opportunities to be in a movie like The Wrestler. I got to be in the Nikki Cox show when she had that show, Nikki, about being a wrestler. I got to be a question in Trivia Pursuit, because the question was, which Saved by the Bell star tag team with a wrestler known as the Blue Meanie? And I got to do a tag team match with Screech from Saved by the Bell. I was supposed to do a mixed tag match against Luna and Gangrel, and whoever I was supposed to team with didn't show up. The promoter's cousin was Screech's manager, who happened to be in town. And 2 hours before our match, I had to teach Screech how to wrestle, and I basically just stood in the apron while Luna beat the shit out of him. So, but
he is a trained wrestler now, though, isn't he, from that celebrity wrestling show?
Yes, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Dustin Diamond was a cool dude, but so the fact that I got to, you know, teach Screech, you know, the ins and outs for like 2 seconds to have a match, which was after a minor league hockey team where they lowered the ring onto the ice. So like they had this hockey match, and then they lowered the ring down, and then they have a couple wrestling matches, and here I am in a ring in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with Screech as my tag partner against Luna and Gangrel. And then a couple years later, it's part of Trivia Pursuit, the 90s edition, which is... The wrestling business is weird, man. It's fucking weird.
And I hope to interview Screech one day on a side note.
Yes.
As well as the whole Saved by the Bell cast. That's one of my goals. And what are you up to now? You have a Pro Wrestling Tees site. You're a wrestling trainer, I believe.
One of the cool things I get to do is, you know, when I first got into the wrestling business, Al trained me, and along the way, after my training, a lot of people helped me along the way. So what I'm trying to do is help other people along the way. And, you know, I've done a few things in the business and been, you know, through a lot of different things, and hopefully I can pass on my experiences on to other people. I help out the world famous Monster Factory, which is now owned by Danny Cage, who took it over from Larry Sharp when Larry decided he didn't want to put up with it anymore. So running a wrestling school is almost like running wrestling shows. You got to chase people for money, and you're paying all this money for guys who half want to do it or whatever. But the Monster Factory has a good thing going on now. They're still in Paulsboro. We got a couple kids in Ring of Honor. We got a kid in NXT. We just helped train Matt Riddle from UFC, who's doing great things. We got Punishment Martinez, who's in Ring of Honor. He's about to make a run for the Ring of Honor World Heavyweight title. We got a tag team called Coast to Coast. They're great. They're doing great things, and it's such a great group of. It's me, Danny Cage, Punishment Martinez, and Bill Walsh from ECW, who are the trainers there. And one of our trainers, QT Marshall, went and opened up a satellite school down in Georgia called One Fall Wrestling Academy. So it's just a concerted effort to help try to keep certain things in this wrestling business alive, certain traditions, certain mindsets, and stuff like that. And I might not get in there and teach you how to take a body slam or bump, but I'll get in there and tell you ways to try to channel your inner character, because the Blue Meanie character was supposed to be the Blue Meanie from the movie The Yellow Submarine, but it morphed into just Brian Heffron with the volume turned up. So I got that going on. I'm still doing independent dates. I do a lot of conventions. I just did the Icons of Wrestling convention here in Philadelphia. I try to be as active on social media as possible. You can follow me at Twitter at Blue Meanie BWO. I'm on Instagram at Blue Meanie BWO. If you would like to support me in any way, if you're kind enough, I have Pro Wrestling Tees at ProWrestlingTees.com/Blue Meanie, where you can get the original BWO shirt, or you get my own Spectrum Wrestling shirt, which I helped design. Because in wrestling, there's our niche. There's Pro Wrestling Tees for wrestlers, which has all the cool T-shirts. In Philly, we have a lot of shirts, for Philly sports. There's always a shirt for Spectrum, basketball, hockey. I was like, nobody's ever done wrestling, and that's such a big thing for this area. So Spectrum Wrestling, but I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but if you're kind enough to follow me on social media, kind enough to visit my Pro Wrestling Tees page, and just say hello to me on social media. I try to be as active as possible, because I'm a fan just like you guys. I just happen to be on the other side of the curtain. Well, fortunate enough to be on the other side of the curtain.
And if they want to book you, that's through your Facebook, or is there
Facebook, Twitter, or you can reach me through Bill Behrens at showbiz@aol.com, and he helps book the meanie. So I got a really cool booking next month in New Mexico, and I basically am going to take the Breaking Bad tour where I get to see Walter White's house and shit like that. So if you got something cool for me to do, book me. There's things you do in wrestling for money, things you do for fun. So I'm trying to have fun, and just enjoy, what we do. So.
And I do think you should become a comedian and do it in your Daisy Dukes through your stand-up.
The funny thing about the early days of finding myself and finding my character and wearing the Daisy Dukes, there was short story long. I was supposed to be the Raw Boy. Eventually, I became the Raw Boy. I got to do the Raw Boy, the gimmick I was originally booked for, but never got to do. And Goldust is supposed to jump me, beat my ass down the ramp, put me in the ring, Shattered Dreams kick, which is going to lead to our feud with the whole Blue Meanie Blue Dust thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Raw Boy. I come out as Raw Boy. Goldust jumps me. I spill down the ramp. He throws me in the ring. Sets me up for the Shattered Dreams kick. One leg here, one leg there. I'm straddled on the ropes. I look up at the Titantron and realize my balls are hanging out of my tights. I repeat, my balls are hanging out of my tights, which they say the camera adds 10 pounds. My balls looked huge. So I'm sitting there, right? And I look at Goldust, and he's just like, I'm like, I don't know how this kick is going to end because I'm exposed. I'm like a uncovered wire. I'm a raw nerve with my nuts hanging out, about to get kicked in the nuts on Monday Night Raw. So he kicks me. I go down, tuck. I go back to the locker room. I passed through, I believe this was in Arizona, and for whatever reason the production truck was on the inside of the building, so I walk by the production truck and I get a smattering. People come out of the production truck, give me the golf clap. You know, hey, your balls came out. And then I walk by, the monitor where everybody's sitting watching, hey, your balls fell out. And then years later, I would always run into Luna Vachon, and she'd go, Meanie, remember that time your balls fell out on Raw? I'm like, yes, Luna, I remember when the night my balls fell out on Raw. Which is not the first time Jim and the Boys debuted, but if you're going to do it on Monday Night Raw.
Well, I don't think we can top that story, so we'll end it there.
I think I've taken up enough of your battery power, so thanks for having me, man. I love this channel. I love the content you provide for the fans, and Mrs. Meanie, I get a test. I'm watching your clips all the time, so thank you for having me.